band's good. We played a couple shows this last towards the end of this last year that were pretty big ones for us. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a band. There might be some people who would listen to this that might know. There's a band called The Faceless. That's a pretty big international kind of technical death metal band. And we opened a show for them sometime. I want to say it was like November maybe or early December, but yeah, it was a big show for us, and we got another one in June with a really big band called Insomnium. That is kind of an international melodic metal band, and otherwise we're just playing some shows here and there and writing new songs, and yeah, we're recording our first like full length EP right now. So
It's a strange world to go from writing to death metal, isn't it?
I mean, I could see perhaps if all I did was play an instrument, but doing vocals, I get an opportunity to write lyrics too. So kind of it kind of coincides with still being like writing creatively for whatever project I'm doing, and it's definitely different. That's for sure. It's kind of like more akin to writing poetry, but I still basically just write stories for my lyrics. So
Oh, really? And I like story songs.
yeah.
I don't know if I'm into death metal necessarily. I'm not even sure if I'm not really in any type of particular music either. I don't seek music out.
Mhm.
It's like a background noise for me, really, and more than anything else. My brother, though, on the other hand, I think death metal sounds like something he would be like all about.
Yeah. What do you
I'm
listen
not
to when
sure.
you usually listen to music? When
Uh, I'm listening to Sinner Man from Nina Simone like over and over and over again right now.
I don't know if I've
Just
ever heard of that.
Really? Nina
Yeah.
Simone? Oh
Yeah.
man, it's a beautiful piece of music. That's what I do. I find like a piece of music that I really feel attracted to, and I'll just play it until I get sick of it.
Hmm.
Then I'll be out of music for a really long time. When I write, I like these long form, like couple hours worth of like concentration music.
Hmm.
Like I don't no clue what they're called. Oh, there goes my alarm. We're supposed to be doing a podcast now.
Yeah. My phone will be doing the same thing here shortly.
Dismiss. In fact, I had completely forgot yesterday I had a podcast, and the guy he messaged me at 8:10. I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
god!
He's like, "Hey man, where you at?"
I'm rushing around. Then, of course, Google Hangouts wants to not work for me, so it's like 30 minutes later. I'm finally on the podcast with him.
Yeah.
Almost did the same thing with you, but I set an alarm for 7.
Yeah, dude. I don't know what it is, man. I can't remember. Even every time I figure it out, too, I just can't remember that Eastern time is 3 hours ahead. I always think for some reason it's 2 hours, and yeah, but
You're forgetting about the Mountain Time Zone
I know,
or
I know.
or the Central Time Zone. Either one of them are quite forgettable. But
Yeah,
well,
I
no, I
always
guess not
forget
the
Mountain.
Mountain anymore with Denver there.
Yeah. How are you doing? Are you still working on that project? Forgive me for forgetting, but I know you had mentioned you were working on something as far as writing's concerned, outside of just your kind of
Um,
writing prompts.
I finished the novel I was working on, so now it's
Nice.
being read and probably another edit coming up. Now I'm just trying to find another long form piece of fiction to work on. And yeah, the short stuff is easy. That's like you find a topic and you know spit something out,
Mhm.
5,000, 6,000 words. So that's what your project is. That's what you just published, a collection of short stories.
Yeah, my second collection. I'm definitely ramping up as far as having ideas for longer stories. I think my longest one still was the first story in the first book, which was like 60 pages or something like that. And I have a couple ideas for some longer ones, and there's one that I think I might be able to turn into a novel. I really
Mhm.
appreciate, and I've fallen in love with the idea of the story, but I don't want to I don't want to push it to make it a novel if it's not a novel. I mean, I'm gonna be okay with it if it's just a novella, uh, and in which case I will. I was thinking of maybe releasing on its own and then adding it to a third collection whenever I get that done.
What makes you
Um,
think that you can't push it to a novel? I mean, what's the finishing point for you when you know
yeah,
you were one of those people that just kind of outline and go, or because I mean, I go back to the beginning and I just keep writing
yeah, I can't
until
really I can't really outline. I mean, I guess you can consider my process. I don't know. I guess it depends on what you call an outline. Because when I sit down to write an idea, like I'll be at work or something, and can't remember if I mentioned this last time we talked, but I totally have found like a cheat mode when it comes to writing, where I have a desk job, so I've got a Google Doc that I just hold on to that's in my Gmail account that is for random ideas, you know. And so I'll be sitting there at work doing whatever I'm doing, and I'll take 5 minutes away from whatever I'm doing if I come up with something randomly, like an idea pops into my head based off of music I'm listening to, or I see a picture, or I'm just thinking about it while I'm working. I'll spend a few minutes writing down just some generic, real quick ideas of like scenes that are in my head or whatever it is, and then when I get an opportunity to sit down with it, I'll write out. I'm not writing out prose. It's more like, you know, this guy does this because of this. You know, she walks in the door and sees this. It's kind of this whole like just like uh, I guess train of thought kind of exercise with the ideas of what the story could be. And
Hmm.
then if you consider those an outline, then I guess you could say that I outline it, you know, before I get to it. But most of the time, it's a once it's after that point, I'll then sit down and do a full rough draft that may or may not include half of what I've written, you know, but it's kind of a from the start to the end. It's not a, you know, okay, let's do bullet points and let's outline this entire thing. It's I think I'm more akin to what Stephen King called a pantser, where I kind of just write from the seat of my pants.
Yeah, that's what I do as well.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to, I'll figure out I'm missing scenes that I want to tell.
Yep.
And, that's what makes the length actually. I mean, I decide
Yeah.
things are going to be a novel, they're just going to be a novel.
Yeah.
You know, you know what I mean?
Do you
Um,
find that with an idea like your this novel that you just wrote, did you have plenty of content to get to that point? Did you have to kind of like squeeze out more from yourself in order to make it into the length of what would be a novel?
I started out with a completely different idea, and then that morphed into something else, and then that morphed into what I finally finished writing. In fact, the original idea is going to be I know its own piece of work. I'm working on that as a novel right now.
Hmm.
And then the second idea that I pulled out could be a novella. It could be a novel too. So, I mean, I basically wrote three novels in this one piece,
Nice.
pulled out different ideas that I'll eventually start working into something else.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you just can't keep, you got to keep you have to be willing to cut. I mean, what did Faulkner say? Kill your babies. I
Hmm.
don't necessarily kill them, but I pull them out and I put them in a jar of maldehyde and wait until I need them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's like the best way to do it, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm
I
only
agree.
two novels into my career too, so talk to me in a few years, and I've written a few more. I probably have a totally different idea.
Yeah, but that's a pretty, you know, I bring up the idea that it's difficult for me to push past a certain point with these stories most of the time, as to say that that's definitely an achievement to get done with a novel, not not even mentioning two that you said you've done two now or three.
Yeah, two. I'm working on my
Yeah.
third one now, but again, I have many books that
Yeah.
are in development. I noticed with my first one, if you bounce between, what do they call it, man? I am not a night person. I don't even know why I schedule podcasts for nighttime.
It's all good, man.
I'm trying to guzzle coffee, get my brain working.
No, it's all good.
I could juggle because I have like three or four different novels I'd like to work on,
Hmm.
but I get bored with one of them, and I want to work on something completely different. It's where the short fiction comes in. I mean, I love short fiction, right? I mean, it's
I'm right
so,
there with you.
yeah, I mean, you can get an idea and then you're going to be done with it in 5,000 words,
Yeah.
or less. I mean, just
Yeah.
finish it and get it out there.
Oh yeah.
What compels you to collect your stuff and sell it on Amazon instead of like going the route of sending away to publishers, magazine publishers and whatnot?
For like the individual stories, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I did that with the first book. I, that's a good question. I think the idea is that it's funny because I actually wrote the notes page for this book that I just published. All it says is each book title. It says is original to this collection, is original to this collection, is original to this collection, and you know it's nothing, not too much, no, not too many notes on each individual story. And I remember when I was writing that, I was like, you know, I didn't send any of these stories out before I'm publishing them, and I kind of look at it as like, you know, with the first book, I sent out a couple stories, and I made the observation when I was putting them together and I was editing the first book, that I was editing some of the stories, the three stories that I'd gotten published prior to being in that book. I was editing them. You know, at this point, 6 months down the road, when I've had time away from them, had been writing on other things, maybe I'd gained some sort of um, I guess improvement in my prose, and I was coming back to and editing stories that were technically online for people to read in kind of what I would consider like shittier quality. And with this book, I wanted to just release the stories the way they were, the way, in my opinion, that were like final version, that people could see the final, what they're going to be, what I wanted them to be. Because, um, the stories that I put up that I got published in the first book, like I said, like especially the first one, the first story I ever got published was basically a rough draft of the story that ended up in that first book, and
Yeah, I did that with my first collection too. I was like, I'm just
yeah.
gonna throw everything in this. I'm gonna see how long I can make it.
Hmm.
And then my fiance, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, she read it and she was like, a lot of these stories don't go together.
Yeah. What, do-
You
what
need
what does she mean by that? What do you mean?
I had thrown everything that I had ever written in that first collection.
Oh, okay, totally.
I just want, I started doing, I'm like, oh, 90 pages isn't enough. I want 150 pages, and 150 pages wasn't enough. And I wanted like 200 or more.
Right.
So I was throwing in stuff that I knew wasn't done, but I was putting it in there anyway. And she called me on it. I mean, obviously, I'm not selling the collection either.
You're right.
I mean, things disappear on Amazon, and I have no clue how to market. So it's not like I'm
Well,
getting a readership that way.
yeah. Have you I guess have you like attempted to reach out to like reviewers and stuff?
No.
Yeah, I know with my first book, and I've been doing it with the second one too. I just mailed off a bunch of physical copies, like one to Belgium, a couple to the UK, probably like 5 of them somewhere in the US, a couple on the East Coast, a couple here on
Hmm.
the West Coast, to reviewers to take a look at and give me their reviews, and that was all. I don't have contacts in the publishing agency industry. I don't have contacts in whatever you want to call the the industry. I'm like straight up cold emailing people that I see who are reviewing stuff on Amazon, or
I think we talked about that before, didn't we?
yeah, yeah. I'm doing the same thing with this one, and I've
Have you
gotten
noticed that makes a difference in terms of sales? I mean, I generally don't like to talk about sales. I feel like
right.
it's intrusive, but I mean, would you voluntarily talk about how that works for you in terms of getting
Sure.
stuff out there and new
Oh
people?
yeah, totally, totally. I definitely I could say it right up. I have no shame in admitting I'm not making a lot of money off
Okay.
of my 2 books, so I
Because I
have
mean,
no
that's
problem
basically
talking
what
about
people try
it.
to avoid, right? Everybody wants to
Right.
have the mystique of being very
Right.
successful. But no,
Yeah.
I mean, generally it's bullshit. You're not making any sales, and
Right.
I'm not making any sales. And I pulled my novel off of Amazon, going, "Look, I got to
Yeah.
figure something else out. This just is not working the way I thought it was going to work."
Well, I mean,
Obviously, I had no idea.
right. I mean, I know that so I initially put my first book, I never published anything else. There's nothing else for people to see of mine online. You know, I put my first book up for like 2.99 Kindle.
The cheapest, basically, for an American publication.
If you it's 2.99, it's the cheapest if you want 70% of the royalties. If you go to below that, you only get 30% or 35%, I think is how Amazon does it. Something like that. So
Okay.
so I because I currently have it up for 99 cents, but initially it was 2.99, and I put it up, and I probably dropped like $500 into those online, like maybe not 500, probably like $300 into those online, like we market your book for you.
Oh yeah, like what is it, book dub or something like that?
Totally, totally. You spend 75 bucks on this, master marketing package, and they tweet it out to 50,000 potential followers or whatever, whatever they're doing, and they kind of have this whole price thing for it, and yeah, I put the book out for 2.99 for my first publication, and I didn't get any sales that first like couple
So
weeks.
bad.
And what
Hurts.
I oh yeah, but
I mean,
at
I
the
didn't do
time,
anything like that. I put like a $5 ad on Reddit,
right,
just to get people traffic to my blog,
totally.
and it went away so fast. You know
Did
what
you
I mean?
notice
It's
that
like,
you got any like
no,
actual
nothing.
traffic or anything?
But I would post stuff. I mean, this was a food blog. I was cooking and taking pictures and just trying to experiment with marketing to see what was happening.
Right.
So I would post in relevant subreddits, and I would get a lot of traffic that way. If I
Mhm.
posted an article, it would bump up to a couple hundred. None of that retained. I mean, nobody was sticking around to check out any other articles.
Right.
It was just that one particular. But the ad disappeared. I saw nothing from it. I wasted $5. Maybe you could spend more money,
Totally. No,
but I mean,
and that's kind of where that's what I thought initially was I essentially I mean, dude, I have a fucking day job. I'm not rich by any means. I'm
Mhm.
like low middle class, you can even call that. I'm like just above poverty line, but I was throwing as much money as I could at it at first, you know, like a couple $100 a month on on Amazon advertising or like $100 on Amazon advertising and a month. And you know, I what I noticed most that changed everything, it was even after I reduced the price from 2.99 down to 99 cents was when I started getting reviews. And, I think I wanna say when I first put the most money into those, like, we market it for you stuff, you know, I probably had, like, 1 review. I think I had, like, 2 reviews on the book, the first book,
Yeah,
and,
that's interesting.
it was before I had kind of started doing the whole process of just emailing people, you know, I mean, I didn't find a guide online about it, nothing like that. I didn't see somebody saying, you know, "Hey, just start doing this." I just thought to myself like, "Well, shit. These people are reviewing these books that I enjoy." One of the things was like I went on Amazon and looked at the books that I was currently reading, like a few
Mhm.
of my favorite books, and I just browsed through their reviews on Amazon and was looking and to see specifically there's some profiles that will share their email addresses. Most of them don't, but some of
Yeah.
them do. And you know, I would email them and just be like, "Hey, I really appreciated your review on you know uh, Michael Way Hunt's Greener Pastures, you know, and I love that book, and I really and I feel like your review was one of the reasons you were part of the groups of reviews that really made me buy the book and then enjoy it subsequently, you know, and I was wondering, you know, I'm an author of this book, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to for a free copy review my book, and
So
you know,
fascinating, man, because really, if I look at Amazon, like if I'm talking to you,
hmm
you're an author. I know you have a book on Amazon. The first thing I'm going to do is go to your Amazon author page, click on the book that we're talking about, and check out how many reviews you have.
yeah, yeah,
Right? I mean, if I see you have one review, then I say, okay, you're a loser like me.
no, totally,
But if you've got a few hundred reviews, I'm like, huh,
oh
this person's
yeah,
legit.
yeah. What I've
I'm like,
noticed
"Huh, what's up, man? How do you get those 300 reviews?"
Well, what I've noticed is that, like, I don't know if you read at all in, like, the horror or weird fiction genre, but, one of the
I love it.
yeah,
I liked writing in that too.
yeah, totally. So one of the pretty prolific authors is Laird Barron. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Mm-mm.
Um, he's a pretty prolific author in the weird fiction kinda mashup of horror and weird fiction, and he's one of the most popular, I would say, current authors within the weird genre, if not, like, the most popular,
Hmm.
and, like, right up there with Thomas Ligotti, kind of, and yet his books, they only have, like, 30 something reviews, maybe 20 something reviews on Amazon, I think. I mean, I could look it up now, but I swear it was only, like he wouldn't have more than 50, you know, and you would assume that I've read up on his biography or his profile or whatever on his website, and I don't think he has a day job. Maybe he does, but at least he doesn't mention it. But you know, if one of the most prolific authors within the weird fiction genre or the horror genre currently has only like 30 to 40 reviews on his books, well, what does that mean? Maybe 60. But what does that mean like for somebody who gets like their first review? Or how many reviews does it take for people to start taking you seriously, you know, as far as
Yeah,
purchasing
really
and
good question. I mean, is there math on that? I mean, I haven't really talked to many people about reviews. I mean, it does come up. I mean, you want reviews. You want people to come to your book and say, "I liked reading this. This was fun."
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the dream, but ultimately what I notice is that I like I said, I straight up email people for not good reviews, but I ask them for honest reviews. And I've definitely gotten a couple honest ones of people not enjoying my book, which is not a
Oh,
bad
really?
thing. Yeah, I mean, but that's not a bad thing because, you know, most of the critiques are things I agree with. You know, the prose in the first book was a lot blockier and not nearly as smooth as this one that I've released. At least I feel so. Um,
Well, as the creator, I mean, if
yeah.
you were reviewing your own work, you would always think that it's lacking.
Oh, of
You
course.
know,
You
it's
know,
not as perfect in your application as it is in your head. I mean,
mhm.
obviously, you want to get that mind candy out, and it just doesn't taste the same on paper.
Oh yeah, of course. And yeah, it seemed like you know, but I appreciate reviews because you know I've never had what I've been grateful for is that even a 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, these guys are not saying that it's a terrible collection. They're just saying
Mhm.
they're giving me criticisms that they believe they don't like parts of my writing and everything, but you know they still have something good to say about a few of the stories, which is awesome to hear. You know, and I've yet to have somebody who just straight up said, "Dude, your stuff is shit." You know, I don't like any of it. It doesn't fit well with anything that I read. You know, you should stop trying. I get people who say, I mean, yeah, but
Yeah.
that being said, I still push for. So I'm at 11 reviews on my first book right now on
Hmm.
Amazon. And what I noticed was that 99 cents a sale, it gives me a kickback of like 27 cents, I think, after
Hmm.
all is said and done per thing. And I want to say that right now, and I don't mind talking about this. I want to say that right now I'm getting like a sale, a digital sale of the first book like every 2 days, maybe every day.
Awesome. That's
Yeah,
15 sales a month.
yeah, yeah. It's
That's,
awesome. I mean,
what is that a year times 12? I don't know
yeah,
math.
whatever that. Yeah, I can't even 180, I think, or something like that.
That's
Or
damn good. I
yeah,
mean, it's 180, it's 360 eyeballs looking at your work. I mean, that's fantastic.
right.
I'm
Yeah,
just being I'm just bragging about my math skills now. I've got
yeah,
something to
totally.
prove.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can multiply by two.
Yeah, no shit.
I
I
was
definitely.
when
Yeah,
I
go
had
ahead.
compounded up on Amazon for a long time. I just said, screw it. I'm not getting an agent. I don't know how to freaking publish this book. Here, world,
Right.
here's a book for $2.99.
Yep.
I didn't sell it for shit. I mean, nothing
Yeah.
happened to it. And I always thought it was when you clicked on, check it out, here's the first 10 pages or something. That was what was
Mhm.
turning people off. But I had no reviews either. There was
Yep.
nothing on there at zero.
Yep.
I wonder if that's what it was more than
Yeah.
anything else.
Well, I noticed that, like, even on this, I've read that one of the things that, unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, one of the things that attracts readers most to buying a book is the cover art and the design on it and how well it's done. And then the other is just, and many people won't, and I'm totally guilty of this too. Many people won't even read the reviews, but
Numbers.
if they see numbers and they see an average score that's above like a 4 or like a 4 to 5 star or more, then
Hmm.
they'll look more into it. And I noticed that when I had like 6 reviews, 7 reviews is when it started to pick up a little bit, and I was getting a sale every few days. And um, yeah, I mean, and now like I'm doing the Amazon advertising, the clicks for interest. It's basically, I think I described this to you before, maybe I didn't, but when you advertise with Amazon, you basically bid for clicks. You, when you go on, you look at a book, it'll say like, books similar to this, sponsored books similar to this title. Like if you're looking at whatever your favorite one is or something you're looking at, it'll
Hmm.
say sponsored books related to this title, and those are what I am paying for. Which is, if your book is related to whatever the customer is looking at, if you say bid 50 cents every click that somebody clicks on that link in that little ticker banner there, or that ticker dial, but not
Hmm.
necessarily for every sale, but for a click, if you bid 50 cents, you will outbid the guy who only bids a quarter for each click, and that'll put your book more times in that ticker banner, and every time they click on it, it will cost you whatever it's like 2 cents more than the guy who's lower than you. So if you're the highest bidder and you're bidding $50 per click, well, the highest bidder underneath you, the second highest, might be like 78 cents, and you only spend, you know, 80 cents or whatever. Uh,
What? Now, what? This is advertising on Amazon.
yeah, yeah, and so what I've noticed when I look at the numbers, I've definitely spent way more than I've earned. Um, I've probably spent like $500 over the course of the last 6 months on just the first book, just in clicks alone. But that being said, I mean, I get a few purchases out of it, and it's cool to see that I've gotten 11 reviews already. I'd probably say like 7 or 8 of those are from people that I actually emailed and gave free copies to get the reviews out of them. But a few emails there, or a few reviews here of random Kindle customers is awesome. It's just I'm more investing as much as I can into it for the future when I have more books out and people can kind of look at a catalog of decently reviewed books, that hopefully that would mean that they would purchase more.
Yeah, reviews. I mean, that's definitely an interesting way to look at the Amazon market. Um,
Yeah.
so this book that you have currently, how many stories are in it?
Let's see. I want to say, I think I actually have it up here. I think there's 8 or 9. There's a couple more. Let's see, 3, 6, 9. Yeah, there's 9 stories in this one, and I want to say there was like 7 in the first book. Uh, and this one's comes out to be just about like 10 pages more. It's about another like 6,000 words more than the first one.
First one.
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of stories?
There's still like horror stories. There's a couple short horror stories I would say, but half the stories are a little bit longer than what one might consider a quote short story. But yeah, it's more horror. There's definitely a lot of emotion in these stories. It's kind of what I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to separate um, emotion from horror because I feel like when the best books in horror that I've read kind of meld both of those, and so I want to emulate that as much as I can.
Hmm.
And what I used to think was my weakness was creating actual like characters, like believable, emotional characters. And so I strive to try and create that better. I, Me thinking that that's my weakness, that's what I try and improve upon as much as possible. Yeah,
For a glimpse beyond the terminus is the title
yeah.
of the collection. Yeah, I'm looking at the cover right now, man. It's amazing. You didn't do this art? Somebody else
Oh,
did it.
hell no. There's no way I'd ever be able to do that.
You work with you work with somebody at your work.
That was for the first book,
The first one, okay.
and I was gonna get the same guy to do the cover for the second book, but he was unavailable with a bunch of other projects he had to do, and, so I was kinda like, "Oh, well, okay, I'll find somebody else," and I had actually happened to when I was still unsure of if this guy from work was going to be able to do it for me, um, I had been browsing. You know what DeviantArt is? The website?
Yeah, I love that website.
Oh yeah, dude. So I get lost in DeviantArt, wormholes for hours, throughout the week while I'm at, I mean, not hours while I'm at work, but you could combine it to be like at least like a half hour every other day. I'm stuck on DeviantArt just looking at like really amazing artwork, and I happened upon this guy who had this really amazing work, and there's an artist who was a Polish artist, excuse me, a Polish artist who died in the late 2000s, I think, or the early
Oh,
2000s.
I know who you're talking about. He was killed by a kid.
Yeah, Gisław Beksiński, is the guy's name, and I actually have a piece of his tattooed on my arm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just with how much I adore his artwork and the kinda grim beauty of it, and,
What's the
um,
piece called that you
uh,
tattooed?
he didn't title any of his pieces. I could send you a link, but yeah, he didn't have a title for any of them, and so,
It's got
I
some
wouldn't even know.
freaky work. I mean, it's kind
Oh,
of
totally.
haunting.
Yeah, and so,
I kind of want to look at him. I've only gone through his catalog like once or twice. It
oh, dude,
was a number of years ago.
there's
If you
just
could send me a link just to
yeah,
his name, write out his name so I know how to spell it, that'd be great.
yeah, here, can I do it just over, this thing?
Gmail?
Oh yeah, Gmail. I'll just do that real quick. Um, yeah, but when I first saw Gisela Beksiński's work, I was just absolutely blown away by by the the grittiness, like the organic kind of grittiness of his work, and it just yeah, it astounded me. And yeah, to this day I still view him as being probably one of the best artists I've ever seen. I'm not like an art connoisseur at all, but I've never seen anybody do work like his. And then I happened upon this guy who, on DeviantArt, who had all these paintings that were very reminiscent of him. Like you could tell he was doing a lot, like a good amount of homage to Beksiński. And so I just messaged him on DeviantArt. I was like, "Hey, dude, my name is Jordan Anderson. I write fiction, and I'm going to be releasing a second book soon. And I was wondering if it's not available for the second book, would you be interested in doing a cover for me on like my third book?" And he got back to me a little bit later after that. I gave him my personal email address, and he got back to me a couple days later, and he was like, "Hey, Jordan, and his name is Sandeep Karunakaran, and he's from India,
Hmm.
and he's just a I mean, this isn't to diminish him, but he's literally just a random artist I found on DeviantArt that his artwork blew me away. And I got a hold of him and I was like, "Hey man, you want to do a custom piece for me?" And so he said it would take, and this is no dig on him, his artwork is totally worth it, but he said it would take a couple months to get a piece done, and I was looking to get it published a lot sooner than that, my book. And so I said, "Well, how would you feel about me licensing out one of your already, previously created pieces?" And he said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And so yeah, I paid him some money, and he let me license out the piece that you see there, the Lonely Sailor on the cover, and I couldn't be happier with it. It's a
Yeah, it's a
brilliant
pretty
piece.
amazing piece.
Yeah.
How much did it cost you to license it out?
I mean, I don't know if I should probably say with it cost $250 for me to spend with him. I offered it to him, and I think that was. I'm sure plenty of people offer a lot less, and there's probably people who offer a lot more. It seemed like uh, that wasn't something he was going to argue with. So I'm assuming that there are people who have offered a lot less. But I like to pay artists what I believe the artwork is worth, and um, unfortunately, I don't have a lot more money to spend beyond that, but that's as much as I could offer, and I wanted to give him as much as I could for it. And so he said that that's perfectly fine. And
That's a not a bad amount of money either. Um,
that's totally, and that's not exclusive license. Like there could totally be somebody else who could license it from him and have the exact same image. Um, I didn't ask for exclusive license. If it was exclusive license, I would have probably ended up spending like 1,000 on it. But yeah,
yeah, and this I'm just looking at this dude's paintings. This one I'm sending you right back. It's probably one of the first ones that I saw. The lady on a horse. She's a baby in her lap. The horse is rotting. It's
uh,
absolutely mind-blowingly stunning.
oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah. It totally is, and it's all like apocalyptic. This is just for whoever's listening to this. We're back on Beksinski's stuff. It's his stuff is all very, very, um, you know, post-apocalyptic, kind of dystopian, but it's very, uh, though death-oriented, extremely beautiful. Uh,
You
just
get
so much.
the sense that he's writing about like the aftermath of nuclear annihilation or something along those lines. I mean, he was kind of in that era too,
Totally.
where the Eastern Bloc, I mean, you didn't know if it was going to happen or not happen. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just incredibly stunning stuff. And the way he died is really sad. I mean, I think it was killed by a friend of his that he had loaned money to or was looking to borrow money from him or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's something. It's
Just
something like
unfortunate.
It's probably on his wiki, but I swear it was like the neighbor kid or something. He wouldn't loan the kid $100 or something like that, or the kid wanted $100 for something, and he said no, and the kid killed him for it. And it was like you look at the artwork that this is and that he's produced, and it was what a tragedy,
Hmm.
that is that over something like that. And oh my god, I'm looking through it right now, and it's like blowing my mind. It's been a little while since I went through his catalog. Holy shit.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? Yeah, death. I mean, it's like one of those things. It's always tragic for the people who live. I
Yeah,
guess it doesn't really remain tragic for the person who dies. I mean, you die, so whatever happens after that is either nothing or whatever it is. But I mean, the people that are left behind are always like scratching their heads, wondering at the futility of everything.
right.
It's
Yeah,
very interesting.
I kind of feel like on my own personal, my own personal opinion and my own personal experience, it feels like a lot of what life is kind of preparing for death. As much as depressing as that might sound, it's not meant to be depressing, but it's more, me writing and me spending time with my family and playing music and doing all this stuff is like I want to know that I finished my life at least to some extent. That I was able to do quite a bit with it, and
Yeah.
you know,
I was eating a can of bean with bacon Campbell's soup this morning or this afternoon, actually. And it dawned on me that, this soup has probably been around, this recipe for this soup has been around for decades, if not more than a century.
hmm
And after I die, the soup will still be around and people will always enjoy that soup in some degree
right,
or another. So, I
right,
mean, the fact that I got a can of this soup for what, $1.50 or something means nothing to
totally.
the
Th-
world's enjoyment of that soup. But for
yeah,
me, during my time, I got to enjoy it for a little bit.
yeah, yeah. This
Death is inevitable, right? But I mean, what does it matter in terms of our life? And we just stack shit on top of itself. It's basically what our lives amount to.
right. Yeah, I mean, totally. There's it's actually, you ever heard of Jordan Peterson? He's been pretty popular on the internet recently. Um,
I think I might have listened to him on Joe Rogan podcast at one point.
yeah, yeah, he's a really great
Is
speaker.
he a Canadian professor?
Yes, he is.
Yes. And he
Um,
had a big to do about the whole gender pronoun situation. The guy lost his job.
yeah, well, it was more when you actually dive into his stuff. He himself has even mentioned many times, like he has no problem. He's not a transphobic. He doesn't have transphobia, or you should say he's not a transphobic. He has no problem referring to a person who was born a male as she, if that's what they want to a certain extent. But the idea that, but his whole thing was against the Canadian bill, the C-16 bill, which turned it made not referring to somebody as their chosen pronoun a human rights violation. And what that meant is that you could be prosecuted for not doing it. And that's where he was, and I totally agree with him that when you reach to the point where you are then inhibiting freedom of speech, and you are, because it's obviously one thing to go out and start shouting the N word at the top of your lungs in the middle of the street, in Seattle or something, and not expect something to happen. But that being said, even then, unless you're directly inferring it to somebody, you're not going to be arrested for it. You might be arrested for disturbing the peace, but you can't be arrested for saying a derogatory term to nobody out in the middle of the street,
Hmm.
unless they can find grounds for disturbing the peace. But what C-16 has done in Canada is that it has made it literally illegal for you and as a human rights violation to not call somebody by their preferred pronoun. And that means that no matter how polite 99% of people are, with the idea that, okay, well, he just didn't know that I preferred she or he, or zer, or whatever the pronoun is that's
It's
being
hundreds, isn't it?
selected.
Something like that. There's like many, many, many
Oh yeah,
that could possibly be. It gets confusing after a little bit.
totally. And the idea that that though most people would be like, well, he didn't know or she didn't know, so I'm not going to fault them for it. Now that they know, hopefully they'll follow through with it. There's still the chance that anybody could say, well, it doesn't matter if you just met me. I refer to myself as this, even if as strange as it may be outside of the he, she thing, and you didn't respect that. Therefore, it's a human rights violation. The biggest issue with, and that's what Jordan Peterson was fighting against, was this idea that that it's not about the idea of calling somebody a pronoun or not calling somebody a pronoun. It's the compelled speech aspect of the law that's the problem. When you start, because, and this is actually pretty crazy, dude. I didn't know that Canada didn't have freedom of speech. That's an American thing, actually. Funny enough, that's a pretty, and when I say freedom of speech, I mean like law protected freedom of speech.
Yeah, now that you say it, it kind of rings a bell. They have something else.
Yeah. It's still, you could still be, I think you could still be arrested for talking shit against the queen or whatever parliament. But I don't know, who knows? I might just be bullshit on that, but I swear I heard something along those lines. But so
Freedom of expression in Canada is protected as a fundamental freedom under Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
yeah, maybe I haven't heard of that then. I know that Jordan Peterson has said that Canada doesn't specifically have freedom of speech, and that there's a difference between freedom of expression and freedom of speech in their courts, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Limits on speech were incorporated in the criminal code in relation to treason, sedition, blasphemous and defamatory libel, disruption of religious worship, hate propaganda, spreading false news, public mischief, obscenity, indecency, and other forms.
Mhm.
So, I mean, in one breath they say there's freedom of speech in Canada, and the second breath they're like, well,
Unless you do
except for
this.
these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah. And the scary part is, I mean, we're going on a complete tirade on this, but the scary part is, who decides what is blasphemous? Who decides what is hate speech, and who decides what is false news or fake news,
Yeah,
That's the scary part. That's the entire, I what a lot of people will argue is that if you're not for us, you're against us. And so people who say, "Well, I'm not for C-16 bill in Canada," or "I'm not for compelled gender pronoun speech," they automatically assume you to be a transphobe. Some people do, I should say. Maybe a good portion of people, not everybody, but some people do. Assume that you are automatically this other side, where it's like, well, no, there's a whole other conversation that has to do with this. On a personal basis, I do my best to accept everybody. On a
yeah.
personal basis, for me, Jordan Anderson, I have multiple trans friends that are some of my best friends. But
To
that being
me, I mean,
said,
your personal choices don't affect me. That's how I look at it. It's none of
exactly
my business, really, honestly. If you want to dress
right,
away or be away or whatever,
mhm,
as long as you're not doing anything to hurt me, I couldn't care
yeah.
less.
And as long as it's not compelled that I must do something due to your state of mind, it'd be the same
Well, I
thing.
must treat you with decency unless you're treating me like shit. You know what I mean? I have to be nice to you unless,
Well, let me put it this way: as a person who doesn't like conflict and likes to treat people with mutual respect, I agree with you to the extent that it is your right to be an asshole to somebody. and it should
That's true.
remain your right to be an asshole
Well, I don't
because
have to stand there and deal with it either. I mean, I can't probably punch you in the
right,
face unless you punch me
right,
first, but I
right.
don't. Yeah, I can walk away. That's my freedom too.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. I agree with that, and that's where I feel like the argument discussion really has to go, is the idea that, like, you know, I feel like 95% of the people you're going to meet don't want to be assholes to other people. I
Mhm.
don't want to be an asshole to other people. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. Just be respectful to me, and I'll be my best to be respectful to you.
Mhm.
Whatever your creed and uh, preferences are, it doesn't matter. But when it comes down to compelling me to do something by law, you've now stepped on my toes. Of what if I, in the act, and this is something, back to Jordan Peterson, this is what he's
Mhm.
been accused of, in the act of going before Parliament. I don't know if Canada has Parliament, but
I think
um,
it's Parliament. Yeah, something
yeah,
like that.
if in front of their equivalent of Congress or
I know
whatever.
they have a prime minister and they have a governor general. Basically, they still
Yeah,
worship the Queen of England.
yeah, which is, yeah, pretty funny. He went in front of these people and was saying, like, my even just sitting here and talking to you about how much I disagree with C-16 is going to be illegalized by C-16. And that's a problem. That is a huge problem, that you cannot disagree, because what they were doing is they were equating Jordan Peterson and anybody who also felt the same way or similar ways, or disagreed just in general with what the laws were.
Mhm.
They were equating them disagreeing with it to hate speech. You know, if he said, "Well, I will call somebody what they want to be called if I know them, and if I have gotten to the point where we are respecting each other, and we're mutual friends, or even just acquaintances, or at least just had an interaction with each other," that's still, in their eyes, if it's not abiding by this law that you will do it, that is considered hate speech. And it's not. It's omitting the entire, like, I guess you could say, like, the rest of the iceberg of the conversation. When it comes to freedom of speech and freedom of expression and the ability to critique society and critique ideas, because that's how growth comes from. That's how growth comes out of you know fidget spinners and whatever the hell else is happening in society. You got to be able to critique that.
Mhm. It's a very interesting subject, honestly. I mean, it's
Mhm.
beyond my ability to really fully understand the amount of pain that a person has to go through to not appreciate who they are physically and
Yeah.
mentally. I mean, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble even verbalizing it in today's
Mhm.
world, but I mean, it's hard not to really, you want to grasp it fully because there are people out there that are struggling and
Mhm.
angry and yelling and screaming and wanting attention for it. And it's like, from my perspective, I don't understand a lot of it because I don't have to go through it. But again, like we said
Right.
earlier, it's none of my business because I don't
Mhm.
have to go through it. I just have to respect that other people have to go through it. And I think that, we have to respect each other, even Jordan Peterson's opinion. I mean, that's not even why we were bringing him up. I think we're going to
Right.
talk about
It
his
was about
opinions on
death. Yeah.
death, which I'm
Yeah.
more interested in talking
Which
about death than I am about, his opinions on, gender pronouns. Because if you want to be called Z, that's fine with me.
Right.
I don't care.
Right.
But if I don't know that you want to be called Z and I call you she, I mean, don't jump down my throat about it.
Right.
I'm so sorry. I'll
Right.
call you Z.
Right. And that's
Or I won't call you anything for that matter. I'll just walk away because I don't really care.
yep.
You can
Totally.
yell at me. I'm sorry.
No,
I don't know.
totally. And that's what it ultimately comes down to, I think, is just you can consider it a conservative mentality, but truthfully, I don't like to ever consider myself either left or right, conservative, liberal, it doesn't matter. I can't stand the whole thing, to be honest. Um and I think that involving government furthermore into our lives is a problem. If you try
Yeah.
and push more laws onto the way that we speak, you are inviting
Oh,
interpretation of those laws,
yeah.
from
I
the
mean,
people who
I
are
think
who
the
are
best example of free speech in this country is the Westboro Baptist Church.
totally
You can hate what they're saying, but you have to appreciate they're allowed to say it.
right, exactly,
Because
and
that's
and
how
the
society gets better. I mean, you have to listen to the worst things that people can say so that your opinion can be reflective and better able to argue against the
right.
stupidity that some people actually utter.
Well, that's the best thing about the fact that Westboro Baptist Church exists in the United States, is that because of the fact that we live in a freedom of speech country, you have these people who are spouting hate, and that gives all anybody else who disagrees with them the exact same rights to say, you guys are fucking idiots.
And you
They're
know why
idiots.
they're idiots. And you're able to
Yeah,
formulate those thoughts
exactly.
before they even open their mouth and say, we hate this thing because of blah, blah,
Exactly.
blah. You can think to yourself, well, I don't hate those people because that's a bullshit argument.
Yep,
I mean, I guess this
exactly.
can segue into Jordan Peterson. I think he's a devout Christian, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not certain
Uh,
though.
I feel like he might be, he doesn't ever really bring it up, but he definitely has this whole biblical series that he's been doing,
Hmm.
and he takes a psychological approach to it. I would make the argument that from what I've understood of his stuff, he's not probably a devout Christian, but I know that he appreciates the Christian Bible a lot. And he goes into the stories because he's huge on what was the guy, something Campbell, who wrote like the hero's journey, I think is what the
Oh
book is
yeah,
called.
Joseph Campbell.
Yeah. He's big on to the whole like mythos of the archetypal hero, you know.
Hmm.
And so and I really appreciate his Jordan Peterson's outlook on that, like bringing up a lot of how, you know, the Bible, the Christian Bible brings in a lot of anecdotes, maybe the wrong word here, like examples of the myths of the archetypal hero and of conducting oneself within a state of, you know, people who are in hysteria, or a state of people who are only following the laws and everything, you know. And he really, you know, I grew up being forced to be a Christian essentially until the age of
Hmm.
like 15 or 16.
I grew up as Catholic too. I mean,
Totally. Yeah.
definitely every Sunday. Yeah, it was miserable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But I'm happy for it. I mean, my kids won't grow up that way. You know, I
Right.
probably won't bring them to church, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing for them or a bad thing for them. I mean, are they going to grow up without that sense of whatever it was we had as children?
Right.
Because we were able to rebel against it. I mean, it took me a while, not until 15. I stopped going to church when I was younger than that. But, you know, I was in the army. I still kind of wanted to feel something. It's never happened.
Of course,
I
you know.
wanted it to make sense. And it's like, it didn't make sense.
No, and I totally understand. And really, truthfully, I'm I can't even say I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my life, so I guess that means by proxy, I'm grateful for the fact that I was forced to go to church by my mother when I was that age. But um,
Education for education's sake is always kind of cool.
right now,
Right.
that being said, um, I rebelled really hard in like my late teens, went like full atheist, you know, into my early
Mhm.
20s was pretty vehemently atheist, you know, and then I tried psychedelics and that all changed. And then,
Psilocybin mushrooms and things of that
yep,
nature. I've never done
oh yeah,
mushrooms. I'm going to Amsterdam on the 14th. I think I'm going to try some magic. What do
magic
they
tea,
call them? No, no, no. They don't call them. What do they call it? It's not magic mushrooms. It's magic truffles.
yeah, totally,
And
yeah,
I've hear that mushrooms give you a connection to the earth that your soul
right.
that you don't usually have. It opens up like, I don't know. Tell me about it.
Well, so I've done mushrooms a couple times. I've done DMT quite a few times as well. I don't know if you saw Joe Rogan's the video he did of about DMT, the spirit molecule. Um,
Oh,
and
I listen to Joe Rogan all the time. So I mean, I that's basically where my knowledge of mushrooms come from.
totally, totally, you know, and um, I guess no matter who is speaking, if you're interested in that, you should definitely check out Terrence McKenna if you've never heard
Uh-huh.
of him. Um,
He has the stone monkey theory.
yep, yep. Uh, in fact, you know what? I think we actually talked about this when you and I did our first podcast. Maybe we didn't, but
Potentially.
yeah. I feel like I've talked to quite a few people about that, but you know, the experience of
I had
mushroom.
a really
Go ahead.
great conversation with a woman in South Africa
Mhm.
about psilocybin mushrooms and how they're medicinal. And I really wanted to get into the stone monkey
Yeah.
aspects of humanity, but we didn't go in that direction. She was very political, and her use. I mean, she was trying to protect this older woman who was dosing people with mushrooms for medicinal reasons, and
Yeah, of
she was
course.
being confronted with the rest of her life in prison because of it.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah, it's a horrible story.
so I guess was this like an author that that you were interviewing, and she
She's
happened?
a political journalist who's trying to do a podcast.
Oh, okay.
Is it legal in Washington right now, mushrooms, or no?
No, hell
No,
no.
that's
So
sad.
I don't think it's legal anywhere in the U.S.
I don't think so
Um,
either.
I think marijuana. Well, what's hilarious is that salvia. I don't know if you know what salvia is, but salvia is legal,
Is
and
that tea? Not tea, but it's like they sell it in head shops, or they used to
yeah,
anyway.
yep. I don't know if they do it much anymore because I haven't tried to get any for, you know, 5 or 6 years, but They used to sell them in packets, and they were different strengths, so you could get like a 20x, 40x, 60x, 80x, and yeah, that stuff is what's it's hilarious to me that mushrooms is outlawed, but salvia is legal
That's
because
like bath salts or something along those lines, right?
no, it's a no, salvia is like a plant, like
Oh, it
salvia
is a plant.
florum,
Okay.
and you just smoke the seeds, I think is what they are, and or you basically torch the seeds and you smoke them that way, and it produces like a 5 to 15 minute, much along the lines of DMT, 5 to 15 minute, like really heavy psychedelic trip, and yeah.
So it unlocks something in you. You've done the mushrooms and it unlocks some, what is it? I mean, tell me about your experiences with mushrooms.
Well, so I had a buddy who I met at one of my previous jobs when I worked in Seattle. His name was Corey, and he actually died a couple years back in his sleep. But before, a couple years prior to that, he and I he introduced me to mushrooms. I had already been kind of flirting with the idea of doing them, but I was always really nervous, even though I had done DMT quite a few times before that point. And he grew up having been, down, I think, down in California, you know 13, 14 years old, doing hits of acid with his buddies, and
Mhm.
that to me is like that's completely outlandish from where I was when I was like 13 and 14. There's no way I would ever have done that, but
I've done acid like a couple times in my life. I don't like it. It
yeah,
makes me very paranoid.
yeah, I know the feeling. um and he was much more experienced with psychedelics and narcotics in general, and so we one time we got a hold of somebody, and we hung out at my buddy's place, and there was like five of us, and we all took at least 4 grams or so, 3.5, 4 grams dried of mushrooms, which is a pretty good amount. um, Terrence McKenna calls 5 grams a heroic dose, and
Yeah.
so we did a pretty decent amount. But my experience with mushrooms, dude, it's so crazy, man. Synchronicities, amazing. I was just talking to some people today about my experience on mushrooms and what it meant. um, but I've done only a handful of different types of psychedelics, acid, mushrooms, DMT, salvia, and then I think that's pretty much it actually. But what I've noticed is that, and this may not be the same for everybody else, but what I've noticed is that each of those has their own way of showing me kind of the same thing. And when I say their own way, it's like it does it in a different way. It might be more chaotic, it might be more aggressive, or it might be, more fluid, or relaxing, or whatever it is. But each of them kind of shows me what I believe to be the space beyond life. Um, and it's funny that this kind of all ties into each other, because the reason I brought up Jordan Peterson to begin with was the idea on death. Was I was listening to a video of his where he was mentioning the idea that, the crux of humanity is that we know that we are mortal. That's like the first problem. It's not the biggest problem that we have, but the first problem that we recognize at some point is that we're mortal. We know that in the history of humankind, no matter if the young Earth theorists of 6,000 years or less are true, or if it's been 8 billion years or whatever it is, or 8 million years in the making, or
Billion,
whatever it
yeah,
is.
B, big B.
Yeah, yeah, whatever it is, we are still we're fragments of that time. That we live our entire lives. We
Well, in terms of humans, millions, but in terms of
Right,
like the Earth, it's billions.
right. And I'm making the argument that even if you don't believe, there are many people who don't believe in evolution and believe in the time frame that people have brought up through, scientific, quote, scientific discovery. It doesn't matter either way. The crux of humanity is that we only live, maybe if we're the luckiest of humanity, we live healthily into like our late 90s, uh,
Luckiest, yeah. I mean,
luckiest, and
maybe you get up to 120, but then you're like one of three, basically.
yeah, yeah, and that's why it's amazing to see like those gals who, and for some reason it's almost always women, which is,
Always, yeah.
I don't mind, but
My grandmother, my great grandmother lived to 99 years old. And she was like the day before her 100th birthday, she, kicked off the mortal
yeah,
coil or whatever. But, she lived a very interesting life in terms of she never moved.
right. Where was she based out of?
Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow,
West
okay.
Virginia, the coal country, basically.
Yeah.
But from the time she was 65 until she passed away, she never left her trailer. She
Oh,
never
wow.
left my grandmother's spare bedroom for her. She never did
Yeah.
anything with her existence other than stare out the window and read her Bible. Uh,
That makes
so
it.
I mean,
I'm not laughing at her. It's just the way that you
I mean,
said
in
it.
terms of like a life, what kind of life is that?
Well, I
You're,
mean, imagine this. Imagine you have figured out that the majority of your life, your physical life, your physical capabilities has diminished quite a bit, and now what's left is to search your soul. Is to
mm,
search meaning through reflection upon what you and your body have done up until that point. I think that, you know, maybe that would be like the if you're born into the physical body, maybe potentially not remembering if you had any sort of previous life existence or anything before death or before birth, and you come into it and you're discovering your body again for the first time, and you're going through the process of learning how to affect the world around you with the hands that God gave you. It's like you're trying to figure out what's going on. That's a whole different existence than when you've reached the point where that body has been deteriorating for a long time. The
you're no longer making
processes.
a difference. Yeah, you're not
Yeah,
actually changing anything with your physicality.
right. I mean, you might still be able to do it with your words, but I feel like no matter how old you are, you reach a point or no matter how healthy you are, you reach a point probably around like 70 where it's pretty difficult to affect the world around you physically as you could when you were younger.
Hmm.
But then at that point, you might then realize that, well, okay, that means that I'm well on my way towards the passing, towards this moment when I'm going to move on to whatever exists after this. And what do I do now? When is that going to come? Well, do you spend your time kind of so going back to Jordan Peterson?
Hmm.
um well, first, the this I always thought this was like a really powerful idea, was the idea that why they call um humans Homo sapiens, our species, is that Homo being not
Same,
homosexual, but
right?
Homo being ape, actually,
Oh,
initially.
ape. Is it ape? It's
Yeah.
not. That's not the
I,
same. Or
well,
sapiens is the same.
I,
Same
I
ape.
think I think Homo means homogeneous in terms of like homogeneous and homogeny and stuff. It means same, but I feel like I heard somewhere that the original um, etymology of Homo was meant to be ape, and that Homo sapiens means to know in Latin. And what that means, and the idea is that what Homo sapiens is that we are the apes that know. We are the beings that know that death is coming, and that's what separates us from everything else in the world. Um,
No, it's very true. I mean,
you know,
it's an odd sensation to know that we are 100% alone on this planet as a species.
yeah,
Tigers, lions, a slug. I mean, nothing knows its own mortality like we do.
right,
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, they can't express it anyway. They're not making art about it. They're not
right,
creating religions about it. I mean, they're not doing anything other than living their existence and then not being, beyond that.
yep,
I mean, I know we're going to get into your experiences with psychedelics, but I was thinking about this just yesterday. I actually talking about this exact same subject, and was kind of hoping that we would bring this up and get into it a little bit. But I mean, in
yeah,
terms of consciousness, I mean, you could kind of pinpoint certain things in your body, like your heart or your taste buds in your mouth, or something along those lines, or the carpet underneath your feet. But in terms of who you are, it
hmm,
almost feels like you're driving the body.
yeah.
You're making the decisions, you're pushing it, you're stepping on the gas pedal, you're making things happen. And that has nothing to do with the body itself. It's just your vehicle to get through your existence.
Well, look at it this way, to challenge that, and not necessarily that I have anything against what you said, but I just want to play devil's advocate with this. Is that if you've ever heard of the term the gut brain connection, the
Yeah.
gut mind connection, if you think about the idea of, okay, well, when I go to eat, am I deciding that I'm going to eat, or is it based off of this like, curdling kind of acidic little like tug in my stomach? And I'm like, oh, yep, it's time to eat again. So you go and snag something to eat. When you go use the bathroom, is it based off of you just deciding it, or is it as soon as you feel, a bladder full, or you feel, something happening, that there's going to be you're going to have to shit soon? Is this
I mean, you have to remember also, these are very enjoyable activities. I mean, eating and going to the
totally?
bathroom, they feel good. Put something
Yeah,
yummy in your mouth. It's a wonderful experience. You know what I
right.
mean? Eating it,
Oh yeah,
getting full, but you could eat too much of the wonderful thing and then feel like absolute dog shit.
totally.
Or you could eat something bad and then in the bathroom and it feels horrible. But I mean, these are relieving moments, and
Mhm.
you could eat grass, I guess, and be full,
That's
but
true.
you're choosing to eat because it's an actual enjoyable sensation.
Right. So maybe then what you could say is that there is a there's a part of the decisions we make because like I've also noticed I was trying to conceptualize this with a buddy of mine a couple months back was the idea that a lot of emotions you feel in your stomach, you know, and in your
Hmm.
chest, kind of in your lungs and your stomach area, like there, and in your sternum, a lot of emotion you feel there. Like when you're nervous or you're fearful, kind of, but especially when you're anxious and you're nervous, you feel it in your diaphragm. Your lungs kind of take quicker breaths. Your stomach is a little tighter, and there's this whole kind of bodily reaction to you feeling anxious about something.
And that's involuntary too. You're not
Totally,
wanting your body to feel like that. That's
totally.
like the animal nature of who you are. The
Yep.
thing that you're riding around then is kind of malfunctioning in a way.
Yeah. And maybe what it is that there's a it's like there you have two hands on the controls, and one of these hands is your body and one of these hands is you, you know? And your body itself can breathe and the heart will beat even if you're brain dead and your consciousness is technically gone. I guess there's no way for people to know that if somebody's quote brain dead that the consciousness is actually gone. We can only base it off of the fact that they're not doing anything.
We don't even know what a consciousness is. I mean, it's
No
just a
shit.
theory. We don't know where it is in the body. I mean, this
Yeah.
thing that we are, whatever it is, the guy in the spaceship, we don't know
Yep.
where that thing is exactly. We can't pinpoint it. I mean, is it the neurons in our brain? Is it the synapses, the nerves? I mean, what is it that makes this thing happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the whole reason I even brought up Jordan Peterson was on the mention of the idea of finding purpose in life. We were talking about writing, like why the hell do we even do this? Why is it that we sit down and produce these things in what is essentially a life that is just piling shit upon shit.
Mhm.
and and I
And we know that there are so many other people doing the exact same thing. I mean, the
oh yeah.
likelihood that we're going to catch on and somebody or millions of people are going to read our stuff,
Mhm.
it's just like it's so daunting. Why even do it? But yet we do it every single day.
Yeah, I mean, because I can imagine it would be a great feeling to know that every one of my books, and this is no dig on Stephen King, he's done great work to get where he's at, but it would be a great feeling to know that no matter what I produced, New York Times is going to call it a number one bestseller.
Right?
You
You're
know,
going to make the New York Times
no
bestseller
matter
list
what, no
with your
matter what.
worst novel. I mean,
Yep,
yeah, what an experience.
no matter what. Now that being said, it still drives me to write because I love the idea of other people reading the fiction that I wrote, what is essentially for myself. Um, the there's people who will say that if you're doing something strange with your characters or you're doing something with a scene and your beta readers aren't into it. I mean, this is totally my own personal experience. It's my own personal opinion, but I write for myself. I don't write for other people. I write for myself what it is that I wish I could be reading in other people's books. I get my best motivations are a from going through my little deviant art rabbit holes where I find pictures and images and stuff that I just want to write stories about.
Yeah.
B, when I read somebody who has a great premise for a story and fucking flubs it in the end.
Oh.
It's like, dude, you could have done so much with that, and that would have been, it would have just hooked me and it would have brought me along for this ride because I've experienced this in other people's writings that really did drag me through the muck and the grime and the horror and the love and the emotion and everything that really made me come out on the other end thinking, holy fuck, this was an amazing book or this was an amazing story. And that didn't happen with this one. So it makes me want to be like, well, I'm gonna write a story that I know that I'm going to like. As kind of boring as that might sound to somebody who's not a writer, that is essentially what we do. It's like, what do we want? What do we wish that we could read? Other people would be writing. Well, let's write that then. You know.
I don't know if I
Um,
think like that in terms of why I write.
oh, okay,
I
yeah,
was thinking about while you were talking, and when I was a kid, like young, 9 years old or something, my parents made stilts for me. Like they were like maybe 2 feet above the ground, and
totally.
walk on these little things. And it took a while to learn how to do it. But once I did, I wanted to do more on those stilts. I wanted to do tricks and whatnot, and experiment with whatever it meant to be on stilts or
Right.
juggling for that matter, or lifting weights, getting to that next level. And I feel like writing is the same thing for me, where it's like an evolution of the skill itself.
Hmm.
And one day maybe I'll be Stephen King's level or something,
Yeah,
godlike on the New York Times bestseller list
yeah. Automatically
if I do a
bestseller
good
list.
job.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so do you? I guess my question then would be, and I didn't mean to insinuate that, you know, those who are worth writing only write for themselves. Like this is again, this is only my opinion on it, but I guess my question for you would be: do you edit your stories to see what other people would enjoy? Like, do you edit like plot points and characters and climaxes and stories to think about what other people are going to believe in them, or do you do it for yourself?
No, I write everything with the idea that I want to be done with it and start something else.
Totally,
I
totally.
mean, I don't really care about the audience necessarily. I'm always thinking about that next story. I mean, writing that first sentence and then working my way through to the ending. I'm always thinking, what's next? What's next?
Yeah, definitely,
What's
man.
going to happen next? What am I going to do?
Yeah, there was a famous quote from Asimov, I think, where they asked him, Isaac Asimov, they asked him, if the world was ending tomorrow, what would you do? And he said, I'd write faster.
Exactly. I fantasize about, being completely alone. Oh my God, the worst nightmare I have is like being a prisoner in one of those terrorist prisons, when you're like under the ground and you're stuck in a cell. I would still write.
Yeah, yeah,
I fantasize about having some method to write, and I know nobody would read my stuff if I was a terrorist locked in a prison or stuck on a, spaceship someplace far away from humanity.
right.
I still add writing to that thing. So it's really not about an audience necessarily as it is getting it done,
Yeah,
getting it out, finding some way to pinch it off. You know what I mean?
totally. Yeah, I really do think I love that a lot of this is related to everything else we've been talking about, but I really do think that one of the reasons why I personally write is to better understand my own life and to
Yep.
better understand life in general. Uh, the the topic of this most recent book of mine, the second book, the theme across all the stories is death, and kind of life and death in general. It's kind of uh, a co concept, concepts between each other, and that I think that's one of the reasons why I feel so much more passionate about this book than the first book. The first book was definitely kind of, I love the first book. I love that I wrote it. I'm very proud of it. But the first book was definitely like kind of random stories, fiction that I wanted to write. Just stories that whether ended up in death or not were like action and horror and drama, and this one was a lot more of like trying to and this wasn't conscious, but it definitely came out towards the end. I totally realized that, like, okay, well, I just wrote a book where every story has to deal with death. Is this going to be boring to the people who are going to read it? Well, I hope not, but at the same time, this is just what's come out of me, and maybe it's not necessarily that it's all like, there's a death and then these people react to it. That's not what I mean, but more that, like, the overall kind of feel of each one is like, what does it mean to be born? What does it mean to give life, and what does it mean to be dead or to die? And how do you deal with the fact that we are mortal, and what happens with that? And I hope that on a subtle level, I hope it's not boring for people who read it. But again, like I said, I don't mean for this to sound selfish, because I don't want it to sound like I'm cocky. I try to be very humble with my writing. I don't pretend to be good, a great writer, but I write for myself. I write these stories so that I can understand better my own life, my own imagination.
I mean, who said all writing is selfish?
I don't remember.
Um, I am going to find out right now because I quote the dude all the time.
Yeah,
But he's basically saying that writing is it's not a worthy activity because it's not living a life. It's pretending to live a life.
right.
Um, and he's a great author in terms of what he's accomplished with his career. And I'm trying to you know, find out who that is while I'm trying to talk.
Oh, it's all
It's
good,
very
man.
distracting to use the internet and have a conversation
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah.
Do me a favor though. What you said you use mushrooms and it helped you
Mhm.
connect your being with the idea of death. What I mean, I'm very curious about what that means. I mean, in my
Sure.
opinion, I mean, I've listened to Duncan Trussell a little bit and I really
Mhm.
enjoy some of his thoughts on, what's on the other side, who we
Yeah.
are as a species. I mean, what consciousness is, what this energy in our soul is. It's incredibly interesting. And maybe you had some kind of realization that you
Well,
want to share.
yes. So yeah, I have no problem sharing it. Yeah, especially while you're looking that stuff up. I as I said, I grew up being told that there was a Christian God and this was the way it was, and everything from my mother, and she brought me to church, and then I rebelled against that, and said fuck that, and I went atheist and all that, and then in my mid 20s, I started for the first time ever. I smoked weed in my mid 20s, and then coincidentally, I moved into becoming creative as well. I started playing music, learning how to play the bass guitar and then the actual guitar. And then I got into psychedelics shortly after that. It's when I met my buddy Corey I was mentioning. Um, I had already done DMT a few times, and what I experienced, I'll say that what I experienced on mushrooms and what I experienced on acid and what I experienced on DMT and salvia is this very different experience of all kind of, or I should say, different lenses of kind of looking at the same thing. And this is totally going to sound really weird, but I'll try and conceptualize this as best as I can. But if you imagine that what you're looking at in life is kind of a canvas, like an art canvas that you would paint on. Well, the canvas has a bunch of fibers of paper or whatever it is, or fibers of hemp or whatever the hell they use, like woven together in a very small, intricate pattern. That if you were to like magnify the canvas and you looked and you see and you started splitting those fibers apart, if what we're looking at in life is basically a rendition, like a screen that you're looking at, like a representation of what your body is, the stimulus your body is getting, what psychedelics have done is they kind of separate those fibers, and they let me see beyond them and let me see past that and see into the uh like the inner workings of the, I guess, the entire point of it all. Like it man, I totally sound.
Well, what's the whole point of it all?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that's kind of just what the joke is with it, like, not to make psychedelics and life out to be something that's a joke and not worth it, but it's like the interpretation that each of us has in any sort of revelatory experience, whether it's psychedelic induced or not, is kind of our ability to interpret something that is out of the ordinary, that has shown us a little bit more of the core inner structure or the inner point of what life is. And I feel like, as Alan Watts put it, Alan Watts is a great philosopher. He said that, he was saying that, like, psychedelics can only show you the door, and then it's after that that you have to kind of walk through it mentally on your own, regardless of if you have psychedelics or not. And I know that what I guess with DMT, what I felt most was the first couple times. What I felt, and I bring this up because with mushrooms, all I did was just feel a more potent version of this, or a longer lasting version of this. So I'll bring up DMT first. Is that um, with DMT, the first couple times was pretty out there as far as the experience I was experiencing with colors and geometry behind my eyes and my third eye. And I'm seeing this. I'm not seeing it in life because I had my eyes closed, but I'm seeing this other thing. Like, beyond the physical realm, I'm seeing this other realm, and this other realm is showing me these colors and this imagery of intersecting, kind of like maple leaf shapes and jagged lines and intersecting triangles and squares and stuff, and there's all this color that is incorporated in all of it. And then um I would see these random images. Like, the first time I did DMT, I saw this image of this, like, scorpion tail, this massive scorpion tail in front of me, like a stinger or whatever, and then ramping off of the stinger was this, like, rainbow, like paint almost, as crazy as that sounds. And this, like, black abyss, there's this lit up scorpion stinger, and there's all this paint, this rainbow paint coming off of it and just kind of showering everywhere. And so this is very psychedelic, but it was very kind of like, okay, I'm experiencing this, I'm unsure of what to do with it. But then the latter trips I had, and then my trips on mushrooms, were more like I've fallen into what I came from. I've fallen into the womb of where my consciousness came from, whether that is this all collective, every human being lives here after they die, all human souls go here, or, all the souls of all the living things go to this one like depository at some point. And that's where I had gotten a glimpse of it, and I dropped into it. I know that what I felt most was this overwhelming feeling and sensation of love, of this, like, return to something that is telling me, like, we're so glad you came back, even if only for a visit. We missed you so much. And like, I it sounds weird, but I felt like I was being like hugged, like my soul was being hugged, and it
That's what a
was
lot
just
of people say about near-death experiences too. They have that same sense of overwhelming love.
totally, and if you think about, Jordan Peterson brought it up that the crux of life is that we're mortal, and that that's not the worst problem. The worst problem is that in life exists malevolence. That there are some people who, there are a lot of people who, with this mortal life, will use it to harm other people and harm the world around them. And we are left with this idea that, what do we do with this? Do we focus on what makes us happy? Do we put ourselves into the way of this malevolence and try and be brave and courageous and fight against it? Where is that balance? And I feel like the experiences on psychedelics allowed me to see that I still forget this constantly, because it's been quite a while since I did psychedelics. But one of the lessons I learned was that no matter what, there is this thing waiting for me at the end, beyond death. And it is this thing that, the last time I experienced it, and this may not be for anybody else, but on my opinion, when I did psychedelics, I felt what it's going to be like to be dead. And all it was love. It was like this idea that you have returned back from your journey, and we're so glad that you made it back here. And then I often wonder to myself, whenever I get on this topic, whether I'm talking with somebody or I'm thinking about it on my own, is the idea that, is that heaven compared to hell? Is there even a thing such as heaven and hell? Can I get lost in can I be ill prepared for death, so much so that when death finally comes, I never allow myself, like my soul never allows itself, or whatever exists afterwards, never allows itself to let go, and then fall back into that
What did
core.
Richard Matheson kind of suggested that in his book, What Dreams May Come,
Hmm.
where ultra religious people never really acknowledge that they've died because they didn't go to some kind of storybook heaven or something
Yep.
along those lines, or Jesus didn't come and collect them or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating, and I'm wondering. I actually thought about this the other day, whether or not mushrooms or psychedelics or even Special K is kind of killing you in a way and
Hmm.
putting your brain into that death mode, because it does
Totally.
sound like a near death experience, and
Totally.
maybe it's releasing that death chemical, and you're experiencing what everybody's going to feel like at the end. I mean, we're different, but at the same time we're all made of the same kind of chemicals, and our
Hmm.
bodies work all basically the same way. Our fingerprints might be different, our faces might be different, but inside it's basically working on the same kind of plumbing. And at death, you will have this really magnificent experience, thinking that you've gone to some kind of afterlife or something along those lines, because you self love yourself. I mean, you might despise the things that you've done with your existence. Maybe that love is what you always wanted people to feel about you, but you always felt about yourself. When you're looking in a mirror, generally, I mean, you're like, dude, I'm awesome. How come people don't see that? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And when
Eh,
you die, maybe there's some kind of, release where you're like, hey, dude, everybody feels that way about you.
yeah.
And it's you. I mean, how many people are inside you? Millions, billions, something along those lines, possible personalities. I mean, I don't know. The last
Yeah.
part's complete bullshit, but you know what I'm talking
No, no,
about. I
no.
mean,
I totally understand. The to go off your to first answer your point, or to react to your point, or respond to your point about the mushrooms and stuff, kind of giving you like a mini death. If you think about it, there are plenty of mushrooms. This is the honest to God truth. There are
yeah,
plenty
that's
of
that's my
mushrooms in
point.
the
There's
world
plenty of
that will
mushrooms that will kill you.
yeah, that will kill you if you eat them. Doesn't matter if you have, one or two caps, or you have like 15 of them. It'll kill you. And then there's these other ones that, through and this is crazy to think about, through the experimentation of humans before us, they have found mushrooms that don't kill you, but instead bring you to that brink of death mentally, and let you sit in that, like, let you dip your toes in it, or submerge you completely in it for a
Yeah,
little bit, and then bring you back to your body.
there's
And
like that
it's
same chemical. I mean, the pituitary gland releases it. I can't remember, is it psilocybin or some other kind of
oh, you mean the
chemistry?
pineal gland?
Pineal, yeah, is that what
Yeah,
I mean? Not
yeah.
pituitary.
The pineal gland is the one that's, obviously, Joe Rogan says it, and a bunch of other people say it, but we can't know for certain. But
Yeah.
maybe we do. But the pineal gland supposedly releases what is considered the DMT molecule, or
DMT.
like a psychedelic molecule when you're in high states of trauma.
I
And
looked it up. I mean, according to medical science, that's complete crap.
yeah, I mean, who
But
knows?
I don't know anything. Like I said, I
Yeah,
can barely tell you what 12 times 15 is, I mean, without using a calculator. So
right.
I'm not the person.
There was
But
scientific magazines used to say that women couldn't have orgasms either.
no, unless administered by a doctor.
Which you could totally see how that's fucking bullshit. Like that's
Hey,
it's like the
I'm a
same
trained
doctor.
orgasm giver.
Oh, I know, dude. The same doctor who's giving the gals orgasms is the one's like, yeah, they can't have them unless you come in and get them rubbed out
And
by
they
a
need to do it every month or they'll die.
professional.
Yeah, humans are malicious. I mean, really are, because we are nothing but animals. We are those apes looking to propagate our species by any means necessary. So our genes live on. I mean, those chimpanzees that have wars with each other,
Hmm.
it's basically us a million years ago, if not longer. It's
Yeah.
amazing that I can sit here and look at my house and it's been built with engineering perfection. And it's not going to collapse on me any second. And, our distant cousins are living in trees throwing shit at each other.
Totally, dude. I mean, the fact that
They're the
we're even
closest
sitting here,
ones related to us. I mean, there's us and then
yeah,
there's them. And there's so much separating us. It's unbelievable.
yeah. The fact that we're sitting here talking over the internet about this very topic, about these ancestors who, when you look at them now, like their technological advancement compared to ours is astonishing.
Uh,
I mean, if you
some people
really
do
think
say
about
they're
it,
evolving, though. Like they're actually, by generation, becoming better at developing tools.
yeah, and like
Will they
using,
have their own monkey internet one day?
yeah,
Potential.
yeah, they should. It's like that whole thing where if you put you put a typewriter with a monkey on an island forever, at some point he'll type out the entire Constitution of the United States of America or whatever, or
Yeah, I've heard of like millions of
Shakespeare, and
monkeys with a typewriter. With each
yeah,
typewriter, eventually they will collect the works of Shakespeare or something along those lines.
yeah. But that omits the potential, the kind of um, uh, I guess the slight against that kind of thought experiment is the idea that if a monkey started pressing one key forever, he would still never produce the works of Shakespeare.
Yeah, but then you have to imagine forever, right? Infinity. I mean,
Yeah,
infinitesimal possibilities. I mean,
right.
Einstein said the multiverse. I mean, there's so many possibilities out there.
Yeah,
I cannot touch the moon. The moon can't touch Mars. Mars can't touch the moons that circle it. There's so much space between
yeah,
us and the next star, and we'll never get there in our lifetimes. Our children won't get there. Maybe our grandchildren won't get there. There's no point to get there. I mean, we have a home here. You know what I mean? It's
oh
like
yeah,
it's a crazy experience being this. And maybe that's the journey. Maybe there is something else out there. And the point is something. You know what I mean? The point is experience this reality, and then maybe there's something more that you can do with the experiences that you have.
yeah. I
I don't
mean,
know.
that's the entire point of being for my own life is being artistic. Is like I don't know what else to do with these feelings of needing to produce something, because I'm kind of lost in this idea, this knowledge that I don't know what life truly is, and so I'm trying to figure it out, and the way that I figure it out is by doing something, and if I'm doing work, my job, which I am not fulfilled by at all,
Mm.
then what else can I be doing? Well, I'm doing my relationship. I'm actively participating in my relationship with my fiance, which I'm completely fulfilled by. But obviously, there are other reasons. There's other things that need to be fulfilled that another human being cannot do, and that's why I produce, you know,
It's
artwork,
also very interesting to think
writing.
about the fact that we're able to kind of do this kind of mental masturbation where other people around the world are too exhausted, hungry, sick, dying by ambulances exploding in
Mhm.
their midst to actually have these kind of thoughts. You know what I mean? To
Oh
play
yeah,
around with their existence. I mean, we're the same as them. Do they end up in the same place as us at the end of the day? I mean, they're barely functioning on an intellectual basis. Or maybe
yeah.
they're not. Maybe that's racist. I don't even know whether what I said is appropriate.
I don't
But I
think it's
think
racist. I mean, that's a good thing to think about because it makes you, it shows that you're trying to be empathetic towards those who don't have the same situation as you. You know, I mean, we have a luxury here in the West, but specifically the United States, that we have a luxury that if you're willing to put in the time into a day job, no matter how unfulfilled you are, our economy and the masters that rule our country, these pieces of shit that control everything, still haven't ruined it enough yet to where we don't have at least some free time. And with the free time, we try and fulfill ourselves. I mean, actually, to be honest, you could even look at it as, what if us doing this is a result of the fact that we are doing work that is not satisfying? I don't know what you do for a day job, but for me, I work behind a desk doing quality assurance for software. And, yeah, it pays the bills, but I am not fulfilled by it in the slightest. And, if I was working, I'm actually in the process of trying to become an electrician at the age of 31. And I'm hoping that that will offer a little bit more. I need hands on something. I need to feel more involved with the physicality of the world, because all I do is spend all my time in the digital world,
Mhm.
and digital documents and shit like that that mean nothing to me, and software that means nothing to me, and uh that being said, if it doesn't fulfill me that way, of course I'm still going to search elsewhere. I'm going to write, I'm going to do whatever it takes, and I play music to like get stress out or whatever it is. But you have these people who live in these countries where they don't have those, you can call them luxuries, but they also have lives that every single day they have to work a lot harder than I do for food, you know.
I was 18 years old. I was doing duty at which is me basically stay up all night in the battalion area when I
Mhm.
was in the army. And they have these pictures on the wall, all these soldiers that died in the history of that particular unit. And they got Medal of Honors or Bronze Stars or whatever.
Mhm.
And I started doing the math, when they died based on when they were born. That's like,
Yeah.
that dude's 20 years old.
Oh,
That
yeah.
dude's 21 years old. That dude's 20 fucking 4 years old. And he lost his life
Yep.
because he dived on a grenade or he fell into a hole or something
Yep.
along those lines. I mean,
Yeah.
they're
And
kids, they're
dude,
babies.
especially you can think back and try imagining to yourself right now, at the very point of death. You're trying to imagine yourself now at your current age, and somebody says, "Okay, unfortunately, you're going to die in about 4 minutes." So you're on the precipice of death, and you're trying to understand what life has been, and then take yourself back to when you were 20 years old, and what that would have changed is your perception of life and your perception of what death was on its way to you right now. You know,
Nobody really tells you that you're going to die, though. If you look at like the
right?
hospital situation, if you've gone for a heart attack or something, everybody around you is going to say you're going to be okay until you're not. And nobody's
It's
going to be
true.
around to tell you anything at that particular point in time. Even on a in a combat zone, you might be dying of an injury. Nobody's going to say, "Hey, bro, you just lost your leg and you're bleeding out. You're
Right.
going to die." They're all going to
Yeah.
tell you, "Yo, man, it's going to be okay. The helicopter's on its way to take you to wherever."
Yep.
Nobody's going to tell you that you're dead. You know what I mean? In fact, I just read something so fascinating about materialism. Death never happens to you because we're always kind of a little bit behind.
Yeah.
We're always thinking in the past. We're always constantly catching up to the present and what's happening.
Yeah.
And what is it? I mean, there's like a number of seconds that we're actually behind reality.
Right.
So when death occurs to you, you're still dying, and
That's
then
a
you
good
just
point.
stop living.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
That's
never
so.
actually reach death. I mean, there's not a point where you go, "Oh shit, I just died."
Yeah.
Your physical body will never actually go, "Oh, I'm dead now."
Yeah. Totally. I feel like I want to say it's something like 0.7 seconds or something like that is what I
It's something
remember.
small, but it's still a point where
Right.
you're not like on top of where the moment is.
Totally.
You're still constantly catching up with your existence.
Yeah.
It's like a
And
shadow of reality based on your interpretation of reality.
Alan Watts, he has this whole talk. He has a bunch. He's obviously has hundreds of talks, but one of them specifically has this segment on how us in the West don't we try and say people, you're going to be fine. You're not going to die, and it's this idea that it's like trying to put death underneath the rug, sweep it underneath the rug and not pay attention to it. Whereas you have these other cultures, excuse me, these other cultures, specifically like older cultures, in humanity's past, that genuinely, in a kind of a odd way of putting it, worship death. They looked at it as like, this is the next stage of life. There's nothing to be afraid of. You know, all that you can be afraid of is not fulfilling your soul's desires before you die. You know, and that purgatory was itself it was a purgatory of the soul, of not fully living these days that you had at life. If all you're doing is, because I know that the reason why I'm afraid of death, after psychedelics, I'm not afraid of the feeling of being dead. I'm afraid of the feeling of dying and thinking to myself, "Well, fuck, I wish I would have done this one thing better." Or damn it, I didn't I was right in the middle of that last story, or I was right in the middle of making love to my wife, or I was right in the middle of, you know, eating a fucking cheeseburger,
Campbell's
whatever it is.
soup is going to be there after I die.
Yeah.
Campbell's soup is more substantial than my life is.
Yep. Yeah, a corporation has risen above its creators and is now gonna be something that's gonna last longer than both of us.
Forever, right? I mean, the book that's sitting on my shelf, it might get passed down to my son, who'll pass it down to his children, but it's just a bunch of words that I own, and I am no longer there. And the Campbell soup that I ate today, I mean, that recipe will sustain other people for centuries potentially if Campbell soup is successful enough to keep their doors open. I mean, we mean nothing basically at the end of the day. Once we're gone,
But
right?
that's
We
the
barely have anything left over in this world.
Right, but that's the romantic thing about, in my opinion, that's one of the most romantic things about writing. Let alone children, you having your own children and leaving them for the world beyond, like
Yeah.
them outliving you. One of the most romantic things about writing, in my opinion, is that no matter what you are writing, no matter how shitty it is, if you this is why it's funny. It's almost like the act of writing and the quality, the sustenance of your writing, substance of your writing, it's like doesn't matter. But if you can get a printed copy, that has the potential to outlive you. And isn't that what we want? Is just to have some sort of outliving
Yeah.
effect that is
But
beyond.
eventually we'll go away though, maybe in a few centuries.
Yeah, maybe.
Like
Or
Christopher
maybe.
Marlowe, William Shakespeare, there's a guy named Webster. I
Yeah,
mean, it just goes away eventually.
that's
I
true.
mean, I walk by bookstores all the time in the city that have their discount books outside of it.
Hmm.
And I sit there, look at the spines, and go, I don't know any of these people.
Yeah, yeah.
These books are all going to be recycled, and these words are going to be lost forever. And these people sat behind a typewriter, pouring their soul into these stories, these
Hmm.
sentences and paragraphs. I mean, they really wanted to do a good job. And somebody's going to take these words and mush them down into mush and make new paper out of them.
Yeah. I have this. I have this like uh, daydream occasionally that I'm going to go out at some point and put like a copy or two copies of each of my books into like a baggie, and then dip that into like wetted concrete, like a hardening concrete,
Uh-huh.
and then take that block of concrete, go out in the water, and just throw it out in the ocean, and then leave that there for whatever whatever civilization like 3,000 years from now discovers it, and it's like, oh, these ancient writings of America, whatever it is, and it's just me talking shit and masturbating mentally with a bunch of horror
Yeah,
stories.
it's really interesting to think about the fact that that what if you're writing here actually only there's a physical copy, but then there's also a spiritual copy of it as well.
Totally.
It doesn't just die on paper; it actually lives in a whole nother life in some kind of spiritual zone or something along those lines.
Mhm.
Thinking back to Richard Matheson and What Dreams May Come, it's a
Yeah.
really profound book. I'd love to write a death fantasy like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, I feel like, I never read the book, but I loved the movie, and
Yeah, the movie's really good too. The book
yeah.
is better. Well, I don't know about the book being better, but it does go into a little bit more detail about Summerland is what they call the name of the place, and
Mhm,
he world builds a lot more. So the story is not as important
mhm.
in the novel. And I don't think he doesn't reunite with his wife. They both get reincarnated, and they have to reconnect that way, or something along those lines.
Oh, really? Is that
Yeah,
so in the movie, doesn't he reunite
he
with her?
pulls her out of hell or
That's
whatever
right,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, out of
'cause she
the. I
committed
don't think they call
suicide.
it hell necessarily.
Yeah, because she committed suicide because he died or something like that, and so he had to go down and find her or whatever. It's a very powerful movie. I really enjoyed the way it was done.
So yeah, Oscar Wilde said that all art is immoral.
Immoral?
Immoral.
Yeah.
For emotion, for the sake of emotion, is the aim of art, and emotion for the sake of action is the aim of life, and of that practical organization of life that we call society. So he's
Interesting.
saying it's a waste of emotion to be an artist. You should spend all of your emotion on society and bettering it. And
Yeah,
Oscar Wilde was a crazy artist, so talk
yeah,
about self-hate.
no shit. But I mean, that's a I guess I can kinda see that. It goes back to what we were talking about before about the idea that, like, you know that you're going to die at some point, and you know that society and the world contains malevolence and immorality. How much of the time do you
Immortality too, it'll continue on regardless unless there's no
yeah,
more Earth and Sun.
how much of the time do you spend trying to fix it, and how much of the time do you spend trying to enjoy it? How much time do you spend trying to create art that is for the sake of emotion outside of, like, completely. I guess I don't know if it's possible, maybe it is, but I don't know if it's possible to create art completely outside of your own emotions in
No,
reflection of the
I don't
society
think
you live
so.
in, you know?
I mean, that's why they have computers, right? I mean, that's what they're trying to teach computers to do is write a story,
Right.
create art. It doesn't have emotional impact. I mean, I might be in the best mood ever, get in my freaking minivan, drive my wife to the bus, and I drive on Jersey roads, and it's like, man, I will just get into a murderous rage over some stupid person doing something dumb on the road.
Right.
And that's going to impact everything I do for the rest of the
Yeah.
day. So, I mean,
Yeah.
computers don't have that experience. They don't have
Yeah,
to get in their
can they
car and go
experience
anywhere.
frustration? Do you think they'll ever be able to get to the point where they'll be frustrated at something and have to
Absolute bone weariness,
yeah,
exhaustion. I mean, how that impacts your day, a headache,
totally.
getting a splinter on your finger. I mean, these are just like minor things, but they impact creativity on a profound level.
Yeah, I completely agree. Uh, yeah.
Man, it's been an hour and 36 minutes. I love this conversation.
Hell yeah, dude.
Where did I discover you? Was it Reddit?
Yeah, I wanna say you got a hold of me through sci-fi writing.
Yeah. Are you still on that subreddit?
Well, I mean, I definitely peruse that one pretty, as frequently as I peruse any of the other ones, but, because this most recent book only has one story that contains sci-fi really in it, I kinda don't. I mean, I don't know, I guess you can consider, like, there's a couple stories that contain sci-fi in it. It's just more like, yeah, so, okay, the reason why I don't go on sci-fi writing as much and post on there as much is because this next book I felt like didn't have nearly as much sci-fi in it as the first book, and so it's just more kind of a lot of more modern horror and kind of weird fiction and stuff. But there's definitely some in it, there's a couple stories that deal with like portals and stuff, and I guess you can consider that science fiction to a certain extent, but it's more kind of a cult, like paranormality and stuff, and um, but otherwise, I'm usually just perusing like self-publish or writing or writers or whatever it is.
I should go on self-publishing more.
Yeah, so our self-publish is a pretty good resource.
I should go on R writing too. I go to sci-fi writing and fantasy writing. I'm pretty much
Yep,
only in those two places right now.
yeah, they're good. They're good subreddits. This is not a dig on anybody else, but I feel like a lot of the posts that are on those subreddits are kind of asking questions about the writing that I definitely like to respond to if I have an answer to. But for the most part, like, I don't really know what I would contribute to those subreddits myself, making posts and stuff, other than
Are you talking about fantasy and sci-fi or
yeah,
self-publishing? Yeah.
well, fantasy and sci-fi, and even like writers or writing slash writing is there's a lot of people that kind of ask, hey, is it okay if I do this in my writing? What should I do with this character and everything? And it kind of
I find myself wanting to answer the exact same way to every single one of those questions. Just freaking write your story.
yeah,
It's not the end
whatever
of the
you
world
want.
if you get it wrong. Just write that story, write another story, put that one away, write another one. Just keep writing. I mean,
Yeah,
quit asking questions. Just get some balls and write.
yeah, yeah. I feel like
That's not going to
and
be appreciated very much, so I don't do it.
totally. No, I completely understand. It's kind of the same way I feel about it too. Is like I write for myself, not because I'm bullheaded and I think I'm better than other people, but because I know that if I got caught in the loops of trying to depend on other people to tell me if this is a good idea or not, I'd never release a piece that I was even remotely happy with.
Yeah, it's being
It'd be like,
self-assured, isn't it? It's being confident.
right, exactly.
What do they say? Who said it best? I think it was Ray Bradbury. He was asked, "How do you write your fiction?" And he said, "You just jump, you just leap, you just
Yeah,
fall, you let whatever's going to happen happen."
that's
The
great.
reality of the situation is you can't plan every single one of these nuances out. It's going to be chaos at the end of the day. You just got to try to organize as best you can.
Yeah, get as
And
many.
eventually you're going to get good at organization and be on the best sellers list every single time you publish a novel.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Um, so I ask those three questions, but I already asked you those three questions. Do you have a new one for anybody who Just trying to write and strive and do what you do.
Oh, just like a new piece of advice or
Yeah. Have you thought of anything new to
um,
possibly give people?
you know, I'm beating a dead horse with this, but trust me, like I'm not a writer that's somebody that's prolific. I'm not somebody who would pretend to be the best, but I'm telling you, don't write for other people. Write for yourself because and I mean that in that like write something that is beautiful to you. And if the story makes sense to you that this character does this, sure, there's definitely contextual and copyright errors that you can make in a story. Like if you call somebody's cardigan green on this character, but it turns out that you say it's blue in the next chapter, it's like, okay, that's definitely like a contextual error that you can fucking fix. But if somebody's like, well, I just don't it doesn't make sense to me. And I've gotten these critiques on some of my stories. It's like, but I don't understand why you don't discuss the where this thing came from, or it's like you know why did it make sense that this thing came out of this creature comes out of this dark passage or whatever it is, and it's like, well, because that's what I wanted to do with the story. That's what I wanted to surprise somebody with this thing that doesn't make sense. And if you don't like it, I know that when I read it, it's like, fuck, man, there's no context for this thing except for the fact that this character is experiencing it, and that's the context, and so that's good enough for me. you know
That's
and
confidence.
and that's the confidence that you have to have in your own writing, and that comes with time, as far as like confidence in your prose. But from the get-go, don't worry about what other people say about, don't ask like, should I make my character do this or that. It's like, dude, what do you want to see? What would you, if
There's
you
no
were
right
writing
answer.
somebody else, exactly, if somebody else was writing this, what would you want to read? And then do that, period.
Yeah, I like that. Second question is what you're reading. What's on your Kindle? What's on your night table?
Well, I just finished No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy.
Oh,
uh
did you see the movie? You saw the movie.
yes, I did see the movie.
Was
And
it, this is such a dumb question, but which
yeah,
did you like more, the book or the movie?
well, so obviously the book is going to be better because of being able to sit down at a page and just kind of reread something over and over, like to fully grok it. um but the movie was incredible on its own, but the book is definitely better in that, Cormac McCarthy's writing is something to behold. I don't know if you've ever read any of his stuff, but
No, I haven't. And he wrote On the Road, I
or
think.
The Road is
The
what it's
Road,
called.
The Road, yeah. That's apocalyptic father
Yep.
son journey
Yep.
story. I'm
Great
totally
book.
about I couldn't watch the movie. I mean, the movie was just horrible. Just
Yeah.
really bad. Not
Yep.
no, not horrible in the sense that it was quality horrible. It was just like it was really it hit me hard as far as
Hmm.
that reality of the
Totally.
apocalypse they were living in.
Yeah, the it's a very depressing. I mean, it's that's one of the best things about that book. The reason why I love it so much is that it's dude, the entire fucking thing is depressing. The
Yeah.
entire book is depressing, but there's a hope that follows through kind of with it, like this kind of, for lack of a better phrase, almost like a gallows humor type hope, like a gallows hope, where it's like there's death and there's desolation all around these characters, but there's still this hope that they maintain, that in the end kind of culminates to this final couple scenes where it just like, oh my god, like wrenches your heart. It's like, this is the reason why, even in this scenario, if I was put in that scenario, I would still try and make it to the coast with my child. I would still try and protect my
Yeah,
family
that's the
because
thing. I think I
oh,
tried to watch that movie when I was about to become a father. I
mhm.
knew I was having a son, and I was like, "Oh man, I can't watch this. I
Yeah,
just can't do it."
yeah, there's some rough
Um,
concepts in it, but it's definitely a good book and worth it, I
but
think.
I'm gonna have to give it. And that I just hear so many good things about that author too.
Hmm.
What else? Anything else?
uh what are you said your novel's done. What are you doing with that? What's the next stage? Are you having like beta readers for it, or what are you doing with it?
My wife's reading right now for grammar and stuff. She's taking
Mhm.
her sweet time. I'm hoping I'm hoping to do another rewrite, just go through it and add some stuff. I'm working on the last little part right now, and man, I got to the point when I wanted to be done with it so bad that what I read today and what I worked on today had so many errors in it. But my goal is to get it out in March to some people to read.
Yeah.
I would love to have opinions on it just so I can get that, next draft.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, dude. Well, feel free to let's talk a little bit more about that after the podcast, and maybe you can send me a copy. And if I got
All right.
time, I'll
I'd
definitely
love
give
to
it a
hear
read.
your opinion. I actually have a story on the Sci-Fi Writers monthly challenge if you want to check it out too.
Yeah, dude. Did you
Pretty proud
post
of
it
it.
on your? Are you posting? Did you post it on your website?
Yeah, I'm keeping longer fiction away from my website now,
Okay.
because I want to send it out to publications.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
really, the only way to catch my stuff, fiction wise, like short fiction wise, is to check out the fantasy challenges
Yeah,
and the sci-fi
definitely.
challenges.
Yeah, I'll yeah, feel free to link me that as well.
Okay,
And I'll definitely take a look at that because
I've gotten some nice criticisms on it, and I'm kind of proud of that piece.
nice.
Um, yeah, so that's that. I would love for you to read my novel and hear your opinions on it,
Yeah,
and
dude. Hell
trying
yeah.
to get my third one down. How is
Yeah.
your writing going? Are you on to the next project, or kind of
Uh,
juggling things now?
I definitely took a break and just kind of played a lot of video games the last couple months. Not the last couple months, but the last month or so, month and a half. And but that being said, I've been still my random story ideas document that I have open while I'm at work definitely gets its use in, and I got a bunch of different ideas for. I basically already have all the stories I'm going to be writing for the next book, the next collection already ready, as far as like the concepts of them, the titles of them, and I just need to now write the rough drafts of them and just start the process. And but I've been talking with a coworker of mine who is not the guy who did the cover for my book, my first book. That was from my last job, but at my current job, I'm talking with a coworker of mine who's the art director to potentially work together on a children's horror book
Oh, interesting.
for like ages 9 to 12 or something like that. And I've got a story already picked out for that. And
There is a magazine called Cicada, Cicada,
mhm.
and they're looking for stories about monsters, like kid-friendly monsters.
Oh, nice. Yeah. See, the only thing is I wonder. I'll definitely take a look at it. A cicada, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I wonder though is I would never imagine writing a children's book and trying to put like adult themes in it. I'd never mention like sexuality and things like that. But I feel like one of the things that I really enjoyed about like um, scary stories to tell in the dark and Goosebumps and stuff that I used to read when I was younger was they kind of pushed the envelope as far as like the creepiness of what you'd experience. For that age of reading, and I want to do that as well. I want to do the same thing, and I wonder how much leeway a magazine like Cicada will have for kind of trying to push the envelope with what kids will enjoy.
I guess the only way to really answer that question is to read the magazine,
That's a
right?
good point.
And then also Harry Potter really pushed the envelope as far as kids' stories. I mean, by
I
the
agree.
last three books, she was killing everybody's uncle and favorite characters and even the protagonist.
Yep. Yep. That's a good point.
And I don't think there's any sex though necessarily. No sexual. I mean, there's kissing,
Right.
what she called snogging, but I mean, I don't
Right.
know. Nobody was getting it on and moaning Myrtle's bathroom stall or whatever.
Moaning Myrtle. Totally. Um, yeah. Other than that, man.
And what's the third question, man? Where can we find you on the World Wide Web so people can
Uh,
enjoy your stuff? Where's your book? Where's your website? Stuff like that.
yeah. JordanAndersonFiction.com. You can just go to that. That's my website. It's not really fancy or anything. It's just a place you can see information on the book releases. You can look up For a Glimpse Beyond the Terminus on Amazon or see the link on my website. I'm on Twitter at Janders Fiction, Janders Fiction, and yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll have something else done by the end of this year. Um, I am always interested in people who want free copies of the book for reviews, either book. So feel free to email me on the email address on my website, which is jordan@jordanandersonfiction.com with that because yeah, I like to share my writing and I of course could always use the reviews. So yeah, man.
Yeah, man, this has been a great conversation. You have an open invitation. Anytime you want to come back on, just hit me up and we'll do something.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. I really appreciate it. This is fun.